All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live mixing session. If this is your first time here, nice to have you. If you've been here before, I know Mark George is a regular, always showing up, always showing some love from the sunny, he says, Blackpool, UK. Nice. And he's got a Pepsi. You traitor. You're supposed to drink coffee on these things. You know better. But maybe it's not the time of the day for coffee for you, though. That's just fine. So, looks like we got some new faces. Scott, KC2CAD, nice to have you, buddy. Rob Williams, first time I believe I've seen you here as well. From Las Vegas, Nevada, nice. Looks like Scott is from Buffalo, New York, nice. Or, I'm sorry, 20 miles south of Buffalo, New York, okay. So he's in some undisclosed bunker somewhere, hiding out. Michael R., good to have you, buddy. I believe I still owe you a mix critique, by the way. You need to shoot me that mix critique, or at least let me know if you wanted me to critique the one that you did for the song challenge, or yeah. Pirate Beats in the house. He says, sup, dudes. Jenny's genial. I'm going to butcher that name. Genial Sony. Hello from India. I did not know you were from India. That's cool. Got people. This is nationwide. What time is it over in India? That's a good question. More Dylan Prov, another one from India, nice. Playing stuff, I love that name. I'm just playing stuff. He says, yo, Barcelona, good deal, good deal. Well, while you guys are all piling in, you just go ahead and introduce yourselves to one another, let everybody know where you're from. That's super cool. And then we're going to discuss a little bit about what this channel is, especially if this is your 11:30, wow. Especially if this is your first time here. Then maybe you need to be introduced to exactly what we're doing here, because these things, they happen once a week and we go through various different things, whether it's, debunking audio myths. If it is, last time we did a live EQ training, sometimes we just get on here and we just have fun. I mean, every time we have fun, but sometimes we literally have no agenda. We just get on here and we have fun. We talk about Cakewalk by BandLab, other DAWs, how to solve audio issues. This is always open-ended for question and answer as well. So if while I'm doing my thing here, you have some questions, that's what I love doing these for. The live EQ training went over really well, and more than just a static tutorial, which is sort of what I'm been putting out like a majority of on the channel. Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much. I was worried that maybe you slipped through the cracks. I didn't want to let that go to waste. But more than just putting out the static tutorials on the channel, the gear reviews and music production tips and tricks, things like that. I love to do these live things because you guys can literally ask questions while I'm doing something and get like instant feedback, which is super cool. And another thing that I'd like to make mention of is there are other channels that are doing things similar to what I'm doing. But one aspect that is really setting this channel apart is the fact that I'm willing to go live and put this stuff out there, because let me give you a little secret about why some, I can't say all, but why some don't go live is because when you're live, you can't hide your mistakes. So you either have it or you don't. And now granted, we've had some mistakes on here in the times past. We've had like where I hit little buttons like this right here. And then all of a sudden I start talking like this. Yeah, we've had situations like that where I accidentally bumped something on the panel, or the last live stream, the wheel of awesomeness would not spin at all, which I think I got that fixed now, by the way, guys. So if at any time, those of you who are veterans here on the channel, you want the wheel to be spun, just make it known. You know how to get that wheel to spin. Scott, first timer, awesome. Awesome. For all the first timers, we are so glad that you're here. You guys are awesome. James Sheets, rocking it already. Thanks for all you do for the mixing community. Thank you. You know, I'm not going to have time to update the chart toppers wall now. But wow, James, you're like all over it, buddy. If it wasn't for James, I wouldn't have potato chips. I probably wouldn't even be drinking this coffee right now. James, you're the man. Thank you so much for that super chat donation of $10. And he didn't even ask a question. He's just making a statement. So, Brad has a quick question. What audio device are you using and what computer? Okay, that's a good idea. I probably needed to cover that a long time ago, and I'll tell you what, I will get back to that question here in just a moment, but we're going to go ahead and go through sort of what we do. Those of you that are here, we always go through the same things before we jump into the questions, and so we're going to do that now. So as the title has evoked, this is the live mixing session, and the song that we're going to be working on is actually James's song. So it's cool that he's here to kind of see this. Now, we've already went through this a lot, me and James together, through a private Skype call. He signed up for a $10 a month Patreon pledge during a time whenever I was having a promotional for everyone who signs up. They would get 4 free Skype calls from me. So we've literally went through this mix that we're going to be showcasing today and kind of like step by step showed him some things to improve it. He's very knowledgeable already in a lot of these areas. So not only does it make it nice because the song is good, but it also makes it nice because the student is already pretty much right up to par with where he needs to be. So that's super cool. So if this is your first time here, I want to let you know that this channel exists to simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space. The motto around here is we can dream alone and we can all create alone, and we do from time to time and most of the time, but together we can achieve so much more. And so this is more than just getting on here and having fun and showcasing talents and skills and bouncing ideas and questions off of each other. This is also about creating a community aspect where we all can just feel safe together, where we can ask those questions that maybe we wouldn't feel safe asking on other forums or stuff like that, where we know we would get cut down. And it happens. Believe me, it happens. I actually got cut down on the Cakewalk forum this week for a video that I posted, and I had 3 or 4 different messages in my inbox basically telling me I should give up ever making tutorials again, that I'm the worst teacher there is. And then they reneged and came back and said, no, you're not. Actually, that was pretty good after I watched the whole thing. So I don't know what happened, but at any rate, you're safe here. Everyone who's in the chat is always so helpful. If I don't get to a question, they're more than happy to help you. And most of the time, I have not ever had to go back and like correct something that they have said. Most of the time they're spot on because we got a lot of knowledgeable people here. New York in the house. Got some more New Yorkers. So yeah, that's what this channel's whole goal is. We're here to just simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space, to create a safe space for you to come and to dream and create together and achieve great things together. Now let's talk about, this is one of my favorite parts. You all know it is. Let's talk about the HSS, or the Home Studio Simplified chart toppers. Right on, here we are. Now James has just bumped Pirate Beats out of the top slot with his most recent donations. These guys have been like neck and neck since the beginning of time, it seems like. Of course, Zave, he's always been like right in there too. But these individuals are the ones who are helping to fund this channel, who are helping to really propel it into what it is now. And without the monetary blessings that these individuals have poured upon me, just out of the kindness of their heart, if it wasn't for that, we really would not have got to the point that we are. I mean, especially during these tough times, it would have been really hard for me to pay my internet bill if I didn't have money to pay the internet bill to do these things. So thank you guys so much. I want to thank each and every one of you who have given, regardless of the amount that you have given. The fact that you've given anything to me is a huge, huge blessing. Whether it's 99 cents or $100, I look at you all just the same as generous, awesome people. So let's go ahead and jump over to those live chat comments, and we're going to go ahead and talk about, yeah, I don't know, Michael. I'm not sure. And I'm also not sure why that keeps popping up in the live chat like 50 times. That's weird. Maybe I need to see if I can try to see if my chat's broken here or something. Well, thank you, Pirate Beats. I appreciate that, buddy. Let's see if I refresh this, if it comes up properly. This is, like I said, this is part of the stuff with the live that a lot of other people don't give you. We're heading at this live. Okay. doesn't appear. Okay, there we go. Now they're coming in like normal. No, now they're not going to come in like normal. What's going on? That's weird. Okay, so apparently every time someone says something, the last remark is just going to keep getting repeated. That's great. Gonna have to find a way to fix that. That's weird. Okay. Well, it's not that big of a deal. We're not going to be jumping over to the chat too much today. And if I need to, I can always go over to just the side of the screen here and check it out. But I want to cover the question that was asked by Brad, which I believe this is your second time, or at least third, that I've seen you here. So kudos to you, buddy. He says, what audio device are you using and what computer? So by audio device, I'm assuming you mean my my interface, which is basically, for those of you who may not know, this is basically the go-between from a microphone, some sort of a instrument source, to your computer. That's what your audio interface is. And I believe that's what you're talking about. But my particular one that I'm using currently, actually right now, I'm using two. Just for the way that OBS is set up, it works better for me to actually utilize two different. I know it goes way down the rabbit hole with that too. But essentially I'm using the Inbox Mini 2. This thing was made like back in 2000s. It's old. I got it for like $34. And I thought, I'm not going to pass that up. That's an extra USB interface that I can take on the road with me or something. I'm not worried about it getting trashed. So I got my microphone right now currently running through that, and then the audio from the computer is running through my Focusrite 6i6. And this is my sort of flagship interface, if you want to call it that, here in my studio, my home studio, I should say. Then from that, I'm just going into, as of right now, which I have, my new computer is setting right now in the closet. I'm waiting currently on a cable so that I can hook up both of my monitors to it, but it's essentially just sitting there, unfortunately. It's a custom build that I put together myself through PC Parts Picker and all of that. But the one that I'm running into right now is actually just an old school Lenovo. I got it from the Lenovo website back in, gosh, what was that? 2012? Maybe? No. 2014, I would say, around 2014. So nothing too major either. I mean, it was a gaming computer. Hey, greetings from Germany. Nice. Or nationwide here, guys. So yeah, nothing too fancy. It's up until this point, really, it's got me where I've needed to been. Generally speaking, though, after, 6-7 years, a computer starts to really degrade. And it's definitely time for an upgrade. So Focusrite to PC. Yes, exactly. That is my go-to right now. So I'm going to put my mug on the screen here so you all can see me while I'm talking. And then we're just going to dive right into today's lessons. So, thank you so much for the kindness. Great vids. I appreciate that. Okay, so last time, if you were not here for the previous session, we actually went through and we took this mix from scratch and we EQ'd the mix live so that you could see exactly what I was doing in the EQ phase. Now, down below in the description of this video, you're actually going to find a link to my 15-step mixing process, and we're going to actually showcase that here today. You're going to see me sort of go through that whole process right here before your very eyes. And the reason why, just real quickly, just to kind of bring you up to speed, but the reason why that I use a process, and I've talked about this many times, but if you have some sort of a direction, a definitive direction that you can go with things, it's going to make it so much easier to accomplish whatever goal that it is that you're trying to accomplish. In this case, I'm wanting to accomplish a mix. Now, I've always went above and beyond trying to streamline things so that I could get the greatest amount of results or the greatest rewards in the least amount of time without cutting corners. And some of the best way that you can do that is by utilizing templates, by utilizing plugin presets. And we've talked about that in the last one too. Presets are great. Just don't always use just the preset, tweak it a little. But all of these things, they start to stack up and add up. And when you start using presets and templates, and then you start using a mixing system that you follow pretty much to a T every time, that can really improve your speed. And when you can start turning over projects quicker, then you can start taking on more clients without having to hire an intern. So you're saving money, you're making money. There's so many great things to this. So on the current mix that we're looking at, we've essentially went through step one of that process, which was to import all of the tracks into my DAW. Now that doesn't have to be, if you're a Pro Tools user, if you're a Studio One user, Reaper user, whatever it is, these same principles are going to apply to your DAW. So don't worry if you're not in Cakewalk by BandLab. However, I would make mention and say, Cakewalk by BandLab is one of the most powerful free DAWs on the market. There is no other DAW that can match up to this that is free on the market right now. Pro Tools LE has limitations. Reaper Free has limitations. This is completely limitless. Essentially, I bought the Sonar Platinum, which was over $500 with all the plug-in bundled and everything like that. Years ago, I bought exactly what you're looking at right now for over $500. So you really need to reconsider. If you're not using it now, you need to reconsider, and at least, I mean, it's free. Just download it, try it out. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul. If you're making great music on what you are too, I'm not trying to, proselyte you, tell you to come over here and get lost in the weeds. But at the same time, give it a shot if you're, maybe in the market for another DAW. So yeah, we've imported all of the tracks into Cakewalk by BandLab. That was step one of the 15-step mixing process. Step two was to name every track that doesn't fit into the project pre-named slot. So now I'm not using my particular template. I do have a template that I've made called the Pro Start template, which has all kinds of wonderful little tips and tricks on the side notes, which each one of these, if you hit the I button, opens up the inspector pane. Each one of these has a clip section, or I'm sorry, a track section, and you can actually write notes in this description. So in the description of the Pro template that I sell, it actually has like EQ adjustment, not like hard and fast rules, but like, here's good suggestions. And that's just real quick, $10. You can load it in super quick, and it'll give you all kinds of great little tips and tricks. And then it's got pro tips on each of the markers as well. And I am Pirate Beats. I am going to end up making an EQ cheat sheet, but that's only going to be for Patreon members. So you're going to definitely get a copy of that. And regardless of how much you are giving, if you are a Patreon member, you will get access to that cheat sheet. Just a way of showing exclusive thank you to those of you who have invested back into me. So number 3 on my mixing checklist is to actually make sure that all of the tracks are color coordinated, and that all of the tracks have applicable track icons. Now, this is one of those things that, a lot of people often overlook, but when you're in the thick of a mix, you've got sometimes, there was a mix I was just working with here recently, had 46 tracks. You got to do something to categorize those things and to make it easier from a bird's eye view to actually see all of that. And so some of the best ways that you can do that is just simply by color coding those tracks, making sure they have track icons so you can just immediately look at it and go, okay, my guitars are always in red. Those have got to be my electric guitars. My acoustics are always in the brown color. Boom, there they are. My bass is always purple. Boom, there it is. So just real kind of a quick tip there. Meshack Cakewalk is free, absolutely free. Yeah, you got to go check it out. And once you download it, I have an entire playlist on this channel to get you running from all the way from the install and the setup all the way to using it to do exactly what we're doing here today. So, all right. Yes, Cakewalk is free. So the next thing that I do in this process, and we did it here live last time, is I bottom out all of the faders, bring them all down to 0, and I switch that master bus into mono. Now, the reason why I do this is because like we talked about last time, we're addressing phase issues. We want to hear what phase issues might be prevalent in the mix. We're also going to use this to help us to focus on big wins and to make sure that as we are mixing, we're focusing on what matters most. when you have everything in stereo, sometimes you can get lost in this thing of, you know, I'm hearing something over here, but I'm not hearing it over here. And it streamlines the whole process when you can actually get to a point of just folding it all down to mono and saying, okay, I've only got this to work with. And that will all make sense the more that you do this too. And then step number 5, we brought up each element one at a time. We got a good feel for where it was going to go. I call this a rough mix. A lot of people call it a rough mix. I don't have a monopoly on that term. Number 5 actually was bringing up each element one at a time to getting a good feel of where it needs. But then number 6 was doing a rough mix of levels. And then we take care of edits. So if there's any like clicks or pops in the vocals, any breath noises, whatever that might be, I do that on step 6. Now on step 7, that's when we do those EQ elements. We start trying to find elements that are stepping on one another. We start carving out room for things and creating cohesion. And once that cohesion between the instruments and the frequencies that are involved in the mix is achieved, then we can go back and we can say, okay, now I'm going to switch the master bus to stereo and begin panning things on the left and right stereo fields and keeping some things in the center. So we've done all of that. Now we're at the point where you can start sort of sweetening up the mix, okay? We're at step 9, which is we're slowly starting to add in the desired effects, and we're being mindful. Remember this, we're being mindful that while we're adding those effects, we're level matching, okay? And that includes creating sends to my template, my reverb, delay, saturation channels, whatever it might be. I want to make sure that the levels after I apply that are still the same, so it's not hurting my rough mix. But when you start applying, like say for instance, saturation always makes things sound just a little louder depending on how you have it set. So if I don't level match that, what's going to happen is my levels that I've got in my rough mix, because I've kind of set it and forget it, when I start adding in the plugins, everything's going to basically need another rough mix. So there's 2 ways you can go about this. The first way is that you can level match each individual time that you put the plugin instances on, or you can do inside of Cakewalk, which a lot of times I do this. You go up here to this mix recall, and I could literally save this right now, which I will, just to show you. I'm going to save this as a new scene. I'm going to say, I'm going to call this dry mix. Okay. So this is the mix that's just EQ'd. There's nothing added to it. This is what's going to be categorized as my dry mix. Okay. When I go and I make all of my adjustments later, I can actually use this mix recall to switch back and forth between the dry mix and what I'm going to call my wet mix, which is my reverbs and delays and saturation all on the mix. And then I can really see if the balance is still the same or not. And if it's not, then I can just go back and readjust some volume faders. Now that way to me is a little bit quicker, but if you don't have a lot of tracks and you're just working on like maybe 1 or 2 things at a time and you're kind of getting a feel for it, it sometimes makes it more feasible to just go ahead and level match as you go. Okay. I kind of take a little bit of length to explain things at times, and I'm trying to move along as quickly as possible. I know your guys' time is very important, but I feel like if I don't over-explain some things, I'm going to miss out on some opportunities here for you to actually learn and grow. So if at any time you're like, dude, okay, we got it, move on, just hit it in the chat, and I'll be like, okay, they're all over it. So, so at that point, we've EQ'd everything. We're switching our master bus into stereo, and now we're going to start painting. And we're adding in those desired effects. Once the desired effects are added back on, so we're on step 9 right now of adding in those desired effects, then we're going to go back through and I'll show you what we do from step 9 and forward into step 15. So I know that sounds like a lot. You maybe even could, condense that down to fewer steps, but this is just more or less a guide for you to go and to be like, okay, I got to, I've just got to pace myself, and thank you, Mark, for the word there. I've got to pace myself, and I've got to learn a mixing process that works for me. So once you can find a process that works for you, go with it. You don't have to just use my process, but this is a good guide, at least for you to get started in developing your own workflow, your own process. Maybe you can do it in 3 steps. If you can do it, please create a 3-step mixing process, and I will sign up for your email list just to get it. So I'm sure like I said, I'm sure there's ways to condense this, but all right, so let's dive right in now to looking at what we have. For those of you who weren't here for the last EQ training session, I just want you to kind of hear where we're at now. And actually what I'll do is I'll let you hear where we were to begin with, just no EQ adjustments whatsoever. And then I'll let you hear what the EQ adjustments did. So here is pretty much where we started with. Okay, so as you can hear, it does not sound bad at all. In fact, when I received these tracks from James, I was like, wow, this is really, this is really good. So it's well recorded. It's well, it's arranged very well too. It's like it plays on the strengths and weaknesses of one another. It's great. So that's what it sounded like before. Now here's what it sounds like after we did our EQ adjustments. Okay, so as you can hear, just by utilizing the EQ, we have effectively made this mix just sort of jive together. Everything's more congealed. It sounds, it just sounds more cohesive, as we talked about here just a second ago. So now I'm just going to real quickly A/B back and forth between the two so that you can hear the difference for those of you who are new, and then we'll jump right into actually adding these effects. So this is without and with. So without and with. All right, so as you can hear, things just got beefier. More clarity was introduced into the mix. This is the power of EQ. EQ can do so much. In fact, if I had one plugin and they said you can only mix with one plugin, I would choose an EQ, just simply because with EQ, you can get pretty close to exactly where you need to be. All right, now let's talk about what we're going to do to start adding in some effects to really make this sort of shine. And this is where the mixing process comes in. Now, mixing by nature, intrinsically, mixing is just simply balancing things. So the EQ adjustments that we did before, although it was an EQ training session, that was just as much a mixing session as it was anything, because like I've just stated, EQ is really just balancing frequencies, whereas the mixing part of it is sort of balancing all of the tracks together and also adding in effects to get everything to sound sort of radio ready. And so one of the first effects that I always like to add in situations like this, of course, not every mix will call for it. Some of them, especially if it's a live recording, does not necessarily always call for my favorite reverbs, but this definitely does, because it sounds like kind of like a drier sound. And so the first thing that I always reach for are my reverb channels. Now, as I spoke with James whenever we did our last Skype meeting, I like to actually use, and I'm trying to find it here. There we go. I like to actually use 3 different reverbs. And a lot of people have, you know, like, dude, what are you doing? But just hear me out. So on each one of these, I have an instance of the Sonitus reverb, because if you're a Cakewalk user, that's a free reverb that's already there. It's a stock reverb, and it sounds good. Which at one point in time, I want to take a song and I want to use nothing but stock plugins found within Cakewalk and mix the song. And I might even do it live, just to show you guys that it is possible, but you don't have to spend tons of money on plugins. So with each one of these reverbs, I have essentially taken and created a space for all of the instruments that are involved. Okay. this is also beneficial for the vocals, which we're going to cover later. So I have a plate reverb, which is a really fast attack, like smacky, is that a word? Smacky reverb. You have a room reverb, which is the typical reverb that you would hear in a room. Imagine that. It's sort of that where it's not echoey, but it's not like dead, for lack of a better term. And then hall is obviously, that's like where you say something and it just sounds like it's just going forever. Now, it's important to make mention of the fact that each one of these reverbs has a different characteristic, even though it's the same plugin, because of their size, their room size, digitally speaking. And also it's important to make notice of how exactly did I get the reverb settings. So if you go to my website at homestudiosimplified.com, you'll find there, and I'll try to pull it up here without crashing the stream. Thank you, Corey, for subscribing, by the way. Let's see. I'll try to pull it up here and show you. This is not meant to be a shameless plug for my website, but it is a shameless plug for my website. Anywho, if you go here to my my website, there's a little section right here called, let's see if I can zoom in. Boom. The reverb and delay calculator. Okay. So by utilizing this, literally I can just come in here and click on this and type in, okay, like what's the BPMs of this song? Okay. So this song is 96 BPMs. So I know that the beats per minute of this song is 96. So that's going to help me by putting this number in here and say, okay, 96. I want regular. You can select dotted or triplet, but I want regular. So I'm going to calculate that. That's going to tell me that my at 96 BPM, a quarter note duration, which is what we're looking for, is 625. So a quarter note duration in a reverb would essentially just basically be a room reverb. That's exactly what you would be hearing in a room. That's kind of subjective to, give or take, depending on what's in the room, and I won't get into all the semantics of it, but essentially that's what you're going to hear in a room. So in order to get these different settings, which I don't know why I just closed that, I'm then going to take those settings. So I know 625 milliseconds or 0.625 milliseconds is going to be my room setting. So then for my plate setting, because I know it's going to be attacky and quick, I'm going to do half of that. So as you can see here, I went to my decay time. That's what you're setting. And this one is set to seconds, not milliseconds. So I went to 0.3 because it's going to round it up anyway. So I just went to 0.3 milliseconds. Okay. So that's my plate, real smacky. And, yeah, Michael, I actually included that on the website right after I released the reverb video, on how to get your vocals to set perfectly in a mix. So for the plate, I'm going to do half of what a room would be. For the room, I'm sure you can guess, that's going to be 0.6, which is close yet again to that, 6.25. And then for the hall, I'm actually going to double that. So the decay time is going to be 1.2 seconds. Okay. And what this is doing, if you're not familiar with reverb, it's a time-based plugin. It's a time-based effect. That's the word I was looking for. So time-based effects will affect the song if the BPMs don't match up with the time. Now, this right here, this blew my mind. When I learned this a couple of years ago, completely blew my mind, because I always wondered why there were individuals who were reaching for calculators when they're adjusting reverbs, but they were never telling why they were doing that. On this channel, what you're going to find out is I never hold anything back. If I know something that's going to help you, that's going to improve your mixes, I tell you. There's only a few other channels that I can think of right now that actually do that. Warren Hewart over at Produce Like a Pro, he does that. And that's why he's growing like he's growing. He does not hold anything back. I love that guy to death. I'm going to have a moment. Just hold on. No, just kidding. But anyway, if you don't set your reverb, because it's a time-based plugin, it's a time-based effect, if you don't set it in conjunction with the BPMs, it won't jive right. I mean, now I'm not saying that you have to, because obviously your best your best bet is to just use your ears. But when you set that reverb to a time-based effect based off of the BPMs, the reverb will rise and fall at times that sounds cohesive to the rest of the mix, and you're going to save yourself a ton of time. Muddiness is not going to be introduced. Just, I know what I'm talking about, okay? I know what I'm talking about. So by doing that though, now I've essentially created a space for each of these instruments. So I essentially can say, okay, I want these guitars to sound like they're in a small room by sending them to the plate. I can say, okay, I want these guitars to sound like they were recorded in a guitar room. So I'll send them to the room plug in here. Or I can say, I want these guitars to sound like they were recorded in a cathedral. Well, then I can send a little bit of it to the hall. So here's what I like to do though. Essentially, any space that you're in usually has a blend of all three of these. Now, depending on the size of the space, it might just be the blend of the two or even a blend of the one. But usually most spaces, and this is how I picture things, this is just Robert, okay? I'm not saying you have to think about it this way when you're mixing. Maybe you have a completely different style. If it gets you to a good end result, don't worry about what I'm saying right now, okay? But my personal thought on this is I always like to mix something as if it was being played by a band in front of me on a stage. Now, that doesn't mean that it always has to have a live sound, but I want it to at least have that element of all of the players are playing together in the same room. To me, that's what bridges that connection between two instruments that have been recorded in two different times, or two instruments that have been recorded in two different locations. Especially nowadays, that's easy to see that happen. So by bridging that gap and making it sound as if they were recorded in the same room at the same time, it gives the listener, at least in my opinion, I know it does for me, it gives me the feeling that I'm listening to something that I can connect with because these people were in this room and I'm in the room with them, and now we're all connecting together. And that's one of the main reasons why people go to concerts. It's not because they've never heard the songs before. They've heard the songs, but it's because they can be in the same room with the instruments, with the musicians as they're performing, and everyone's there together and they're feeding off of one another's energy. And that's what makes a concert a concert. So essentially what I want to do is recreate that feeling that you get when I'm mixing of that concert. I'm creating a concert in their living room, so to speak, so by allowing all three of these to be present, I can send just a little bit of each instrument and give and take so that I can essentially create that stage that I'm seeing in my mind. So for instance, if I'm looking at the stage, I know the drummer is behind everything, but in a mix, he's still got to be up front. So then how do I do that? How do I get him up front, but yet still get him to blend behind other things? That's where reverbs come in handy. You see, the human mind plays a lot off of psychoacoustics, and we're getting pretty deep into this stuff. I know, just if I'm like, just stop me. But the human mind plays a lot off of psychoacoustics. That's why reverbs are so important, because if you take a source, a guitar source, we'll just say, for instance, a mono guitar, and you slap a hall reverb on it, immediately your mind thinks it's farther away than what it was before, because it gives the impression that it's in a big room and it's farther away. Likewise, if you begin to blend in a room reverb, it sounds like it's a little closer, but now it's in a room with you. It sort of creates a stereo field for it. It creates its own space. So, okay, so I'm gonna try to get off all of the philosophical stuff here for just a second and actually show you where we're going with this. Are there any questions as of right now before I get started into actually using these sends right now? I don't want to jump the gun and miss up anybody's questions or any things that you guys might have. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop those at any time. You don't have to just wait for the end of this when I normally open it up for question and answer. And if there are no questions, then I'll just go ahead and we'll start diving into this. So we've got these three buses, which a bus is just basically a separate routing, a channel that's not here on your track pane. It's just a separate area where if it were on a mixing board, it would kind of be like off to the right, depending on how the mixing board is set up, but usually it would be like off to the right. And it's a section where you control volume levels, where you control EQ to the main board, to groups and just groups of instruments and things like that. But essentially this bus area that we're looking at right here, that's where I've inserted these plugins, is in the bus section. So I've created stereo buses for these tracks. And as you can see over here in the track pane, I've already got several. Yes, they're separate buses that go into the master, correct. So just to show you real quickly, that in action, actually, you can see right here, let me zoom in. You can see right here that my line out of the master is what you guys are hearing. So that's going to that DigiDesign Inbox 2 Mini I was telling you about. That's where you guys are hearing it from. However, if I go to the rest of the buses, the output is the master. So they're all being sent here. So if I was to, let me zoom out of that again. Gotta figure out how to do it. There we go. So if I was to collapse this real quick. So in a sense, if I was to say, okay, all of these buses are basically taking these children, the tracks, they're taking these children on a trip to the master. So that's kind of a little way to remember like what's going on here with signal flow. So James says, if you're using reverbs in the Pro Channel FX chain and you are running through the bus console, would you place the FX chain before or after the console? That's a good question. Honestly, it's one of those that you would have to use your ears, because there have been some mixes where I've done one way and it sounds good. And then there's others where I've done it a different way and it sounds good. I know that's kind of a generalized answer, but that's kind of where I like to reside. As many of you know who have followed the channel, I give a lot of tips and tricks, and I lead you in the right directions, but then I let you make the decisions based off of your ears, because I don't want to be that guy who says, the only way to get a good guitar sound is through a real amp cranked up to 11. I don't want to be that guy, because I actually debunked that guy one time. He went back and forth with me for like 15 different posts about how the only way to get a good guitar sound was through a real amp. And then I recorded a real amp and an amp simulator side by side and asked him which one was the amp simulator. And he picked the real amp. So anyway, that'll learn him. Going back to this here. So each one of these tracks now, I'm going to place sends, and that's how I get them to go to these reverbs over here. So by placing a send in this section right here, you can see I've got here my send sections. So I can either send it to the master, I can send it to the drums bus, I can send it to the plate, room, hall, saturation. So what I've done is I've created sends on each one of these tracks. And these are my guitar tracks. So I've got a send going to the plate, the room, the hall, and the saturation. Now, as of right now, all of those sends are currently off. I've got them turned off because I wanted you to just hear only the EQ moves that were done, because as we start to implement these, I want you to audibly hear, which, by the way, if you don't have a set of headphones on right now, before we start doing this next portion, you need to be wearing headphones at least so that you can hear exactly what's going on. Because I've had individuals that are like, I'm not hearing, and I'll ask them afterwards. They'll say, well, I didn't hear it whenever you did this, and I don't think it made any difference. And so I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what were you listening through? What was your source? And they'll say, well, I was listening on my iPhone. And I'm like, well, that's a little teeny tiny speaker, a mono speaker. You're not going to hear stereo depth on that. You're not going to hear bass on that. So make sure you're at least listening in a good set of headphones or earbuds. These Apple earbuds are amazing, by the way, for checking your mix. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive in now to what exactly these are going to do to these individual instruments. Now, it's best practice not to solo anything when you're doing mixing, because you want to mix it in context with the rest of the instruments. However, for the sake of this tutorial, and even for the sake of mixing at times, you will solo instruments from time to time, just to hone in on maybe some frequencies or things like that. But generally speaking, it's the best practice not to solo something, get it sounding like you want, and then bring it back into the mix, because 9 times out of 10 it won't work. It's got to be in context with the rest of the mix, or otherwise you're losing context. So, but for the sake of this tutorial, and I want you to hear what these are doing, I'm going to actually solo these guitars so that you can hear this. So let's start with this guitar up here at the top. And we're just going to slowly start to bring in these sends that are going to be going to these reverbs that I just talked about. Now, when you create a send to a reverb, you have a separate volume section, so to speak. It's a level section. So in this area right here, it's going to allow me to send as much or as little as I want to that bus. And that's where this really is powerful, because I can leave that bus at 0 on the faders. Don't even have to touch the levels of the buses. Okay. And then from there, I can set my plugin to completely wet. So I'm not getting any dry signal to it whatsoever. I'm essentially using the plugin for exactly what it's intended to do, to create a reverb effect. And then I can just blend in just ever so much of an amount from this send by using this level meter. Then I'm just essentially not really changing the infrastructure of the mix on the bus level, but just here on the track pane. So I hope that makes sense. So let's go ahead and bring this plate in, and I'll let you check that out. I'm going to bring this out and just kind of loop a section. We'll loop this right here. Shift L. For the last video on the keyboard shortcuts, Shift L. You can highlight a section, hold Shift, press L. It will loop only the section you've highlighted. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to bring in the plate. What you're going to notice is these changes are very, very subtle. Now, just by adjusting the send level, you can see it can get essentially all I'm looking for is just that little bit of that girth that's added. Hey, Zave, how's it going? I was worried about you, buddy. I didn't see you in there. Okay, so now we're going to add in the room. Now, immediately, you're already starting to hear this. Wait a minute. Wow. I'm going to take those off again. Sounds good, but so much better when we put that back in. All right, now we're going to add in the hall. Nice. So if we listen to just the hall by itself, now you could really go overboard with this. About around there. I think sounds good. So I'm going to add all these back in. Okay. Now, the next portion here that we're going to be looking at is saturation. Saturation in a mix is going to help your mix really to pop. And you can overdo it just like anything else. You can overdo it. But the key to mixing is in subtleties. You want to be doing like no more than what is required to get where you're going. Like if you can audibly hear what you're doing, sometimes it's already too much. What you want to do is, like in this instance, when I'm putting sends on a track like this, what I want to do, oops, it's not locked in there. What I want to do is, I want to be able to implement these and then take them out and hear, okay, what kind of a difference was being made. And also, likewise, you want to do that in context with the mix. So when it comes to saturation, though, that's one of those things that's just, it's like a little hidden piece of magic that goes into a mix, because saturation does well, it does a lot of things, but one of the best things that it does, I think, is it just accentuates harmonics. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, I went blank. Harmonic frequencies. So whatever the frequencies are that's played by this guitar, it's going to accentuate all the harmonics of those key frequencies. So if the guitar's like fundamental frequency is around, I don't know, 3000 kilohertz for the high end and around 250 for the low end, it's going to accentuate all of that. What up, Mark? He says. But basically, what that does is it thickens it. It makes it stand out without increasing volume. Now, what is even crazier about it is it increases perceived loudness, but it doesn't change volume. Well, give or take. It doesn't change it much. It doesn't change it as much as grabbing a volume fader and slapping it up into the sky. But what it does is because it accentuates those fundamental frequencies and in those harmonics, it gives it a perceived loudness without actually giving it a huge volume boost. So essentially you can, yet again, maintain your same rough mix, your same levels that you've set, to maintain all that, and then just add a little bit of grit and clarity. And that's the other thing that it does, is it adds clarity depending on how you set it. And there are all kinds of saturation plugins out there, but the one that I'm particularly fond of is the Soft Tube saturation knob. I'm trying to bring that up here. Ba-doo-doo-doo. So here's my saturation bus. And if we go in here to the Pro channel, you'll see right here is the Soft Tube saturation knob. So here's the cool thing about the saturation knob that a lot of others do not have. Coffee. No, others don't have coffee either. What it does have though is this setting right here. And this is why I love this plugin above others. Now, you know, from previous experiences, especially with my widening plugins video that caused a lot of ruffling of feathers, which is cool. I'm fine with that. I'm not a big fan of one knob wonders. However, this is the exception. This is a one knob wonder, but it's got this little section right here. Look at me drawing all over the screen right there. Right there. That's it. By switching this to keep high, what that does is it will not saturate anything in the high frequencies, or at least as much. When you switch to neutral, it saturates everything over the entire spectrum. When you switch to keep low, it will saturate the mid and the high frequencies, but will not touch the low frequencies. That is huge. That is huge. And the reason why that is huge is because if you've been around here long enough, you know, I preach it all the time. If you want to get rid of mud in your mixes, use high pass filters and take care of your low end. Well, this will definitely help you to do that. You can accentuate things, make things pop, and give it clarity without introducing mud. I'm getting so excited. I'm getting tongue twisted here. But that's one of those things that a lot of people, they love saturation, but they're like, how do I get rid of the low end? So that what they'll do is they'll usually come up here like this, and they'll slap on a high pass filter and try to take it all the way to like 250 or something like that. Not with this plugin. You just simply select keep low and you're good. All right, so I'm going to let you hear the before and after now of introducing that plugin with this guitar. So this is before. And after. What I want you to look at is this right here. When I select this, it sounds louder, but you're not going to see an increase in volume. I know it's crazy, isn't it? Here, let me take myself off the screen here. So it's not on there, but now watch. It sounds louder. In other words, there's a perception of loudness, but the dB level has not changed. Okay, so this is stuff that you are not going to find out anywhere else, guys. I'm just going to let you know that right now. This is stuff that, well, I shouldn't say anywhere else. There's other people that change this. However, yes, actually it does. And I'll explain that, Jurgen, I'll explain that why. So because I have these sends being sent to essentially to a stereo bus, even though it is a mono signal and it is being sent with the pan to the left, the pan on the actual send itself is being sent to the center. So what it's doing is essentially when it goes off to that bus, it's actually being sent to a stereo bus. So the reverb portion of that is bleeding over into the right side, whereas the dry signal is being left predominantly on the left side. But because I have the send set this way, it's being sent straight up the middle. So if I wanted to change that, I could just simply do this. And what I love about that is you can hear that subtle nuance in the right side, which gives you yet again that sound that you're in the same room with that guitarist. So super cool. Now I'm going to leave this on the center because you're kind of helping me to get ahead of myself here, but all right. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, good night, Meshach. Hey buddy, this will be live for a little bit longer anyway, and the replays are always up. You can come back and watch it later. Have a good night. Sweet dreams, buddy. Dream of mixing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. Now what I'm going to start off of what I like to hear. Hey, what's up, Staley? Okay, so just real quickly, I want to explain exactly why I did what I did just there. So now, as I just previously explained, I have the track itself panned to the left, as you can see here. And I have the send panned to the right. That's creating that stereo width and depth. Now in this particular mix, I've already experimented with it beforehand on the Skype session that was still in chilling in Florida. Right. Like the play on words there, buddy. It's good to see you again, man. So as I previously stated, in the Skype session that we've already done here with James, we ascertained that by panning those to the right, the sends that is, and leaving the track to the left, it actually sounded better, at least to my ears. So, went ahead and did that. And just to let you know, full disclosure, that was pre-existent. to make this definitely a lot quicker and to expedite things so I can really dive into some others. However, what you'll notice is on the saturation, hey, you take it easy, bro. Love you, man. So on the saturation, however, you'll notice I left it to the left. Now the saturation, because I know that that is the one that's going to accentuate the most frequencies, it's also going to be the most direct sounding signal. I want to go ahead and keep it panned with how I have my track panned, because that's going to introduce the panning that I had done previously, if that makes any sense. So if I pan that to the left, the same as the track to the left, it's going to make the original pan that I implemented with my rough mix sound original. But with the reverbs, it's going to allow me to bleed some of that signal over onto the right side, whereas this is panned left. Now the reason for that, yet again, this is all about trying to create that space where it sounds like it's recorded in a room, where it sounds like it's recorded while I'm standing there. And if you're looking at the stage and there's people up there that's playing, a guitarist in this case, let's say he's on the right side, he's stage right, which would be your left. Now, when he plays his guitar solo, you're not going to hear him just in your left ear. But because of where you're standing, you're going to hear him a little bit more in your left ear, but you're also going to hear the reverberation of the room, the amps, everything like that. You're going to hear that on the right side of your head too. So this is where, like, I understand the whole premise. Like, some people really pan things like hard left and hard right. And that's fine. There's songs where I've done that. Sometimes it calls for that. But for the most part, I always like to try to create that space. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I hope all of this makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, stop me. Feel free to ask questions. You guys are already doing great, by the way. Just sticking with it. And as usual, just being awesome people. Okay, so now we're going to move on. We've pretty much done the same with all of these tracks here, but now we're getting to the keys. Now this is a little bit different because now we're using a stereo track, and this is why I wanted to use this mix, because it pretty much has a good blend of everything that needs to be talked about. Now you'll notice here that on this stereo track, we got a few different things going on here. We still have the same plate, room, hall. However, yes, that is correct, Rosso. That's just, you know, I'm not the only person that does that. I'm not saying that I've got the market cornered on this trick, so to speak. But not a lot of people do it this way. However, I feel like, honestly, I just feel like it sounds better. With anything that I say though, guys, always be sure to use your ears and use what you like, because to be perfectly honest, there are no real hard and fast rules in music. It always comes down to exactly what the person themselves like, because, you know, one person's muddy is another person's gritty. One person's tinny is another person's, I don't know, shrill or whatever. There's so many descriptive terms. And what I'm getting at is you got to use what you like. What is it that you like to do? So, and your sounds are going to determine more. And they'll even change over time. My whole sound palette has changed over time. So Levi Myers says, hey man, how do you sidechain reverb? You know, we actually will not get into that on this particular, because there's still quite a bit of stuff to jump into here. But I could definitely do a tutorial video on that here in the near future, or even do a live video on that here in the near future, if that's something you'd be interested in. So I will write that down actually right now. Sidechain reverb. Excellent question, by the way, because that is another great way for vocals to really be enhanced by a reverb without it overpowering the vocals. So that's a good video to cover, especially if you guys are asking for it. So make sure that you, Levi, if you're not already, make sure that you subscribe, hit that bell icon, so that whenever I upload that video, you're going to know that I've actually uploaded the video. Okay. So, and if you're a subscriber and I haven't, you can like get on the community channel, start bombing me in the chat section, be like, dude, where's that video? I almost always get to my videos, but there are times where things slip through the cracks and we all get busy. So He says, I'm not sure how to do it in Cakewalk, so thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, man, I'd be happy to help you. Hey, thanks for subscribing. Just seen it pop up. Good work. Okay, so on this particular track here, though, what you can see is we have the same amount of or the same types of reverb sends. However, what you notice is when we get down to the bottom, now we have 2 hall reverbs. And you're probably thinking, man, this dude is like overdoing it in the reverbs. Like I said, I love reverb. It's one of my favorite, well, it's close to my favorite effect when it comes to, I love delays too. And I love saturation and I love compression and I love, okay, anyway. I always add it first because I feel like it's what gives you the most space for the money. So anyway, on this track, we have a plate, a room, a hall, and a saturation. And what you'll notice is that on the halls, however, I have those panned left and right because this is a stereo track. That was my horrible attempt at making an S, and I'm getting too carried away with this drawing stuff. Okay, so with this stereo track, I'm going to pan the reverb left and right just simply because it allows me to control how much of the reverb is going to the left and right channels. Now, if I panned it straight up the middle, just use the one reverb, I could probably do that. For me and my ears, just personally speaking, I hear a difference. I don't know, maybe you'll do it at home and you'll bring up a mix and you'll be like, dude, I don't hear nothing. I just take it straight up the center. I don't hear no difference. But for me, just that's how I do it. So when we introduce these pianos, actually, let's go ahead and solo the piano so you can hear this take place. Okay. What's the difference between a reverb and a convolver? I'm at a loss for a convolver. If you mean like convolution reverb, if you're talking like that, the difference is basically a convolution reverb is a reverb that's taken from like a specific sound, and they record just the reverb signal, and then they make that a reverb. That's what convolution reverb is. And it's basically like a sound escape, like a snippet of sound that's turned into a reverb. It's kind of crazy how it works, but it works well for certain aspects. So I'm going to go ahead and solo the keys, and then I'm going to, I hope I explained that in the best way possible. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and solo the keys. We're going to bring in each one of these reverb sends so you can hear what they're doing to the keys. Okay, so as you can see, especially if you're wearing headphones, it's very subtle. It's not something that's like over the top. It's not something that's like, oh wow, he put a ton of reverb on there. Nope, it's just enough to add just that little bit of making it sound more real and more lifelike. So just as a quick test, I want to show you. If I take this back to the center, let me make sure you can actually see it. Okay. So if I take this whole reverb back to the center and just leave it like it is, and I'll take off this other reverb that's panned to the right, I just want you to hear this real quick. Okay, versus this where I have both of them and they're panned left and right. Yet again, it's very subtle, but I hear, maybe I'm just crazy. I am crazy. I am nuttier than squirrel poop, but nonetheless, I hear a difference. So for me, I'm going to continue to do it that way. And another cool way of thinking about this is when you have sends that are being sent off, it's essentially just rerouting audio from one place to another. I'm just rerouting this audio to one plugin. So I could have a million sends going to the same plugin and still not be bogging down my computer as much as I would be if I had 15 reverb instances or in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 reverb instances and a saturation plugin. So, Rosso, I take it that's the first time you've heard my nuttier than squirrel poop thing. Yeah, that actually came along because of a gentleman who gets on here all the time named Keith Lane. He's quite the jokester, and I called him out one day. I said, "Man, you are nuttier than squirrel poop." And so now there's actually a T-shirt in the store, the HSS Threadless store, where you can actually purchase that T-shirt, nuttier than squirrel poop. He's the reason why. Okay, so anyway, I heard the difference. I mean, I don't know if you guys did or not. I definitely feel like I hear a difference when I'm doing that. So now we're going to introduce the saturation into the mix. Clicks Piffy, what is up? Hi. Bonkers, Daffy Crackers made us. Did I make that up? Actually, I would love to take credit for that, but there is a gentleman here in my sphere of influence, just a country guy, love him to death, and he is the one that his name is Whitney. His name is Whitney. I know it threw me off too, but he's like 7 foot tall. The dude is just super nice. And he's just a good old country guy. Love him to death. Real down to earth. Well, I guess we're all country people around here. But anyway, the first time I heard him say that, I lost it. I was like, dude, I am using that. I'm taking that. And I've been saying it now for years, probably long after he quit saying it. I've still been saying it. So he doesn't have a patent on it though, so I'm safe. No copyright law is going to be chasing me down or anything. So by adding the saturation in, what I'm sure you were able to hear was that it just, yet again, it just thickens things up, just makes it nice and crunchy, and just helps it to be heard more, helps it to poke out of the mix. So real quickly, by the way, if you're interested in purchasing the Nuttier Than Squirrel Poop shirt, you can go to this link that I've just left in the chat right now, and you can check out all kinds of, and it doesn't have to just be a shirt. I always tell people to buy a shirt, but you can get mugs, towels, I don't know, shower curtains, anything with that design on it from my store. You just got to go to the accessories tab. And every little bit of sales will help to fund the channel. So what I did notice though is the saturation seemed like it was just a little bit overboard. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit in context with this here. There we go. Yeah, I agree, Mark. It just seems like it just gives it some depth there that was just not there before. So now if we hear that in context with the rest of the mix. What is up, Micah? Micah, good to have you here again, man. It's your second time, dude. You were on it. And don't feel bad about having to work and stuff like that. Totally understand that. I'm getting ready to go back to work myself. Ugh. At any rate, coffee, of course. You know I've got coffee. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the bass. Now this is one that kind of, it messes everybody up when they get to the bass guitar, and with good reason. Bass is just a beast. So as you'll notice on this particular bass track, I have the Cakewalk CA2A. If you are a Cakewalk user who is just now getting into Cakewalk, unfortunately, this plugin is not available to you. I feel like I have to say that because here all this time I was kind of led down the wrong path of believing that when individuals signed up for the Cakewalk that we now have, Cakewalk by BandLab, the latest edition, that they had access to all these old plugins that we had who have been with it for years. I started whenever it was Sonar X3. I started with Sonar LE, like way back in the day. And it's just one of those things that I really thought everybody had access to these plugins, and apparently you don't. So I apologize if I have told you to use a plugin that you don't have. Now, I am currently working on trying to figure out how to get you guys these plugins, but I'm not having any luck as of right now. I have went on the Cakewalk forums. I have personally messaged the sort of movers and shakers who have been with Cakewalk for a long time, and I'm trying to see if there's a way, that some kind of a workaround or something where we can get you guys these plugins, because honestly, they rock. Now, is there another limiter plugin like this one that will do the same thing? Absolutely. But I just like to, I mean, it says Cakewalk on it, for crying out loud. Why would they not want to introduce that? Why would they want you to go and download another plugin that doesn't say Cakewalk? Anyway, okay, so I got this set to limit. I'm just going to go ahead and show you my settings real quick. So I've got it set to limit. Another reason why I love it is because it's super simple. This little switch here, I can either use it as a compressor or as a limiter. So I've got it set to limit. And then right here, you'll notice that there's a section that's called, what is that called? I thought if I hovered over it, it would tell me. It says R37, but it's basically like a tone adjustment. So the HF stands for high frequency, I believe, and this stands for flat frequencies. And then the R37 is the name of whatever it is that it does. I'm sure it's probably on some old piece of gear that I have no clue about, but the plugin itself sounds absolutely amazing. So anyway, I normally turn that to the flat side just simply because I think it sounds better. And then you have just you've got like two knobs, a gain knob and a peak reduction knob. So your gain is obviously going to turn the levels up. Then your peak reduction is going to tell it, okay, now that your levels are turned up, all of those peaks, I'm going to be turning them down based off of however you set this. So essentially, if you set it right, you can get your bass guitar to be heard all the time, whether it's being lightly plucked or hammered away like most bassists will do. And bass is a very dynamic instrument. It's played usually with the fingers. Fingers are finicky. Sometimes they get a loud sound. Sometimes it'll be a soft sound. And based off of who the player is, it's going to sound different every time. So by utilizing a limiter, it's, in my opinion, it's even sometimes better than the old bass writer plugin, just simply because it just makes it like upfront and personal and just always constant. Your bass guitar, especially in songs like this, is like your backbone. So you want it always heard. So that's what I've done. Slapped a limiter on it, and then I've got saturation on it. And because I've got that saturation plugin, as we spoke of earlier, set to keep low, I'm not muddying up the mix whenever I introduce the saturation. I'm just enhancing the higher frequency so that you can hear the accentuation of the string being plucked. Okay, so here's what it sounds like if I was to take both of these off. It just disappears. Okay, so moving along very quickly. Of course, a lot of that, getting that to fit well. No, you don't always have to use a limiter on a bass track. I typically speaking will always, I saying you don't always have to, but, and I don't do it religiously, I should say, but almost always I will put a limiter on the bass right off the bat just to see what it sounds like. And if it's just not working, I mean, sometimes you don't need it. But in most cases, a limiter on the bass track, even if it's not doing a ton of work like this one is, can always help, because it's just going to bring your levels up and cut off those sections that are peaking out. And then if you want, you can go in and automate your volume sections and stuff like that to make it sound breathe a little bit more life back into it. So do you have to always do that? No. Yet again, I'm one of those who is a big proponent of never saying you always have to do something, or there's no other way to do it except for this way. because there'll be 50 people that will come behind me and show me different and show you different. Audio is a crazy beast. All I'm basically doing is giving you guys principles, and then you can take them and apply them for whatever works for you. Does that make sense? I hope so. I don't want to sound like I'm just like carting off your questions and being like, yeah, well, sometimes and sometimes you don't. I'm not trying to be that guy at the same time. So on this last track, we are working with the drums. Now with the drums, as you can see, it's a stereo image again, stereo track. So I'm going to do the same thing with the halls that I did on the first one. Now I'm just going to bring in these really quickly, and you can get a listen for what these sound like as I'm playing that. Yet again, very subtle. So I want you to hear that in context, just soloed. Bring in the plate. Just adds that little bit of roomy upfrontness. Add in the room. Gives it the depth. It's starting to sound like you're in the room with the guy now. Bring in the hall. Nice. Awesome. Micah, he has a sort of a question. Cakewalk plugin manager show excluded. Yes, there are access to several different of these plugins in the Cakewalk plugin manager that way. Let me just bring that up real quick, because that's a good point. So if you go in here and you bring up the show excluded, a lot of times the Cakewalk plugins that aren't necessarily readily available will be found in here. However, there are some of those plugins that, like I said, that I have access to because I've been with Cakewalk ever since back in the day, that there are others who don't have access to. So like, for instance, Melodyne Essential. Whenever Cakewalk sort of married Melodyne, they acquired that. And yet again, I was under the impression that everybody who downloaded Cakewalk got a version of Melodyne Essential. And now it's just a Melodyne trial. So that's what I meant by, and I'm pretty sure that CA2A leveling amplifier that I just used, I'm pretty sure, and now, don't quote me if I'm wrong. If I am wrong, let me know though, so I can actually tell people, yes, you do have access to it. It's just in your excluded plugins. But I believe that's one of the plugins that you don't have. And that's why I brought that up just a minute ago. So yeah, good point though, by the way, Micah. If there are plugins that I'm using and you want to see if you do have them or not, by all means, go and check out that screen. Just to take you there real quickly, you go to Utilities, Cakewalk Plugin Manager. Let me bring this over here. It's not going to let me because I got my screen zoomed in. There we go. And within this menu right here, you're going to find down here, show and exclude. There it is. And sometimes that will bring up some of those plugins that you maybe never knew were there. So Micah, awesome, man. Talk about providing some value on the stream, brother. All right. So at any rate, what you heard was it's not really like overboard. When I added the hall in, you would think, oh no, that's going to make it. All it did was just add that snap, not really the snap, but the ring of the snare and the kick and the toms and everything. And it just kind of just made it sound more real. Like this just sounds real studio dry right here. Don't sound bad. Just sounds very studio dry. But when you bring in the reverbs, yet again, now we've created that space like we're in that room with the band. So now you bring that in all in context with the rest of the mix, and this is what you got. Okay, guys, so this, I'm going to save this scene as the wet. So this is our wet mix. Now, like I spoke of earlier, I'm going to go back and we're going to go back to the dry mix and we're going to just A/B them. This is one of the coolest things about Cakewalk. Well, there's so many cool things, but this is one of the coolest things about Cakewalk. By the way, just right out of the gate, want to let you know, I am not paid. I am not endorsed. I am not sponsored by Cakewalk. Just love the program. So by using this mix recall, I've essentially just brought it all the way back down to where we had it before without any of that being done. So now we can A/B back and forth and hear exactly what it's going to sound like and what those changes were so that we can see if we actually helped anything or hindered something. So let's take a listen to the dry mix before. And now let's listen to the wet mix. Nice, nice. Nice. So what you can hear is great help to learn about the mix recall. Awesome. So what you can hear is just, yet again, everything has just got cohesive, sounds like it's recorded in the same room together. It's got vibe, it's got feeling, it's got, you know, and now is there some things we could do to take it to the next level? Absolutely. However, I think we've already been recording now for, let's see. Yeah, we're already an hour into this session, hour and a half into this session. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the last half hour for questions. Now, maybe your question is, well, what would you do to it next? Feel free to ask that question. But as of right now, we're going to go ahead and just dedicate this last 30 minutes. I think this mixes to a place where I can honestly say it's been mixed. Now, everything else would just be kind of like icing on the cake. And as you noticed, I've not used compression. I've not used like crazy mixing ninja tricks like individual just spoke of about, you know, side chaining reverbs. I've not side chained the bass to the kick. I didn't have to because it was EQ'd well enough. So go ahead and start populating the chat with some questions that you've had over everything that we've just covered. Is it completely finished? In my opinion, no. There's still some things that I would do. I would definitely add some compression in some places just to sort of make things sort of play well together. Maybe some delays on the guitars, just some little things like that. But other than that, I mean, that you just heard firsthand when we went from dry mix to wet mix after the things that we've done, it just got richer, fuller, deeper. That sounded like a Vival Sassoon commercial. But anyway, it sounded really a lot better than from where we started. So I'm hoping that you guys are really learning something from this. By means of just doing what we do around here, while I'm waiting on some questions to populate the chat, you know what time it is. It's time to spin the wheel of awesomeness. That's right. This week on the Wheel of Awesomeness, we're just going to spin it because that's pretty much what you do with the wheel. If this is your first time here, I am not completely crazy, although I am, as has already been stated, nuttier than squirrel poop. But this is just something that I implemented early off in the very first days of these streams. And it's just kind of stuck. So, I don't know. Anyway, if you're not familiar with it, basically you spin the wheel dictates what happens, whether it's a song feature, which allows you to share a song here on the show, whether it's a piece of trivia, or I ask you a favorite. There's also a tutorial video request where you can literally request a video, and then I will do that video based off of your tutorial video request. And then lastly, we also have one section on the wheel for a mix critique. So whoever wins the mix critique will then be able to send me a mix. I will take that mix and just give some brief critiques on that. And basically, I'd make like a 4 to 5 minute long video. I tell you, like, here's some things that I feel like would really make this mix better. And then you take them and implement them, and you get good results. In fact, we've already seen that. Mark Bergstaller was one who actually won one of the free mix critiques. He took a song, sent it to me. I gave him only 4 things to change, and the results were amazing. In fact, it got him so inspired that he re-recorded the bass, hired a bass player to come in and re-record the bass. Anyway, it was cool. So if you're not familiar with the wheel, that's what it is. It's just a quick way to kind of break up the monotony and to also just have some fun around here, because who doesn't like fun? Let's go ahead and spin the wheel and see where it lands. And we got favorite. All right. So in the chat section, what has been your favorite tip that you've received from today's training? Was it, what aha moment, I should say, did you have? And the chat section is still not working properly. What aha moment did you have? Out real quick. These are some individuals that I want to thank: Levi Myers, Cinza Burek, Corey McBee, James Sheets. He's like on this list every week. Armand Lorenz, Gazuzo. Sorry. Not sure what happened there. Minder, Graham, Sherrington Lowe. Anyway, you guys rock. Every single one of you rock. So. Oh, my audio dropped out? Maybe it was when I was on the wheel. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I went to chart toppers real quick. Or no? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened. Audio must have dropped out real quickly there. Oh, I bet I know what it was. There we go. Yeah, it was this screen because I didn't have the audio routed to this screen for some reason. Anyway, all I was saying was drop your favorite in the chat section, which it looks like you guys have already done. Okay, FX sends. Nice. Nice. Panning FX sends. Oh, I found out that a reverb calculator is a thing. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. What was the other? Would you also, okay, so James had another question. Would you also use delay as a bus effect? Absolutely. Yep. Now, with delay, because I typically like to set delays based off of what the instrument is doing. If it's a real attacky instrument, acoustic guitar or something like that, the delay is going to be a little bit different for that than it would be, say, for a lead vocal. So that's one of the plugins that I might actually put individual ones on a track. But if I've got, in this case, 3 guitar tracks, I would actually create a delay bus and just send all 3 guitar tracks a little bit here and there and pan them differently. So saves you a lot of CPU usage. So yeah. I think I've got everybody's questions in too. That's awesome. Mix recall. Good deal. Good deal. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you guys got something out of today's training session. The main thing that I wanted to do in this was just to, not just to get on here and showcase skills or try to make myself out to be, you know, the guy with all the answers, but really just to basically let you guys know that, you can do this too. And because this is live, I'm showing you firsthand how I would go about doing it. And you guys have asked questions while I'm doing it. So if this is something that you find really cool, this is something that we do around here at least once a week. So sometimes even twice a week, but at least once a week, I will go live and we'll do stuff just like this. So if this is something you'd be interested in seeing more of or being a part of, by all means, hit that subscribe button and click that bell icon so that whenever I upload a new video or I'm getting ready to go live, you'll know about that. So Jup rendering. Micah, I'm not, unless that's German, I'm not picking up on that one. No sprechen Sie Deutsch. Okay. So Zave says, I'm still not clear on the mix recall, but it looks very handy. Well, Zave, okay, let me, whoa, I'm zoomed into the wrong screen. I just zoomed into the wrong screen. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Okay, so if you go up to the mix recall, essentially here's what happens, okay? So let's say I've got it set on wet mix now. So that's the scene that I'm on, is wet mix. So if I go back to dry mix, that scene is basically, and that's why it's called a mix recall. So I'm recalling the entire mixing board back to where it was. No, it's not German. What is it? Jup rendering. And it says JUP Jup rendering. I'm not sure. Dutch, but you rock. Nice. Okay. But essentially I'm taking the mixing board, quote unquote, back to that mix recall of a dry mix if I go back to the dry mix. And then, and you can see those settings change. I'll zoom out here and show you. So now all of these sends are off again because I've went back to the dry mix. Now, if I recall the mixing board back to the point whenever we had done our changes, now it's back to the wet mix. So you can call those recalls different things, which this is powerful. So let's say I've got one mix the way that I like it, but the artist says, well, I would really like all the guitars panned left on this and all of them panned right on this. You can say, okay, that's fine. Save your mix as whatever you want to call it, like the better mix or the best mix, and then do all of these changes and resave it as a new mix scene. Then you can go back and forth quickly, and you can actually bring the artist in and say, okay, now here's the mix after the changes that you had suggested. What do you think? And they can go, there seems to be something missing. And I'm speaking from experience on this because it's happened before. I don't know, there just seems to be something missing. So then I'll go up to mix recall, click it back to my original mix, and they'll be like, yeah, that's it. And I'll be like, well, that's the original mix that I sent you that you revised. Oh, okay. And I don't do that to be a jerk. I just do that to show them, like, you know, from time to time, what happens is when people listen to a mix that you send them and they're asking for revisions, they always want it to take it to that next level. So they think, well, I bet if you did this, it would make it better. But they don't realize that, you know, there's a diminishing returns. So at any rate, if you have no more questions, guys, we're going to go ahead and end this stream on a good note. Thank you guys so much for everything that you are in my life. I love each and every one of you, even if I've never met you. I love each and every one of you. And I thank you guys for taking time out of your day to stop by here and hang out with me, because during these times especially, man, it's been hard. It really is. And the more that you are alone, sometimes the more depressed you can get during situations like this. And I don't want any of you to be that way. I'm trying my best not to be that way myself. I'm generally speaking, I'm not one who gets depressed easily, but even during this time, I found there's been some pretty rough spots. This week especially has been very rough. My boss and the work situation, I just found out I'm going to have to return to work later than what I thought, which I was like, oh yeah, that's great. But I'm returning to work on third shift, which I've not done in years, I should say. So I'm not looking forward to that. But the good thing about that is I still have a job. So, I mean, there's always a silver lining. You got to look at things with the bright side of life. But at any rate, I'm not going to cry on your all's shoulders. But thank you all so much. James, thank you so much again for the super chat. It was so very helpful, especially during these times. And for those of you who are here for the first time, awesome. Come back. We'd love to have you guys. In fact, if you want, there is a Facebook group that I've created that's called the HSS Collab. Go and check out that group and sign up if it's something that you'd like to be a part of. I don't need your email address, nothing like that. It's basically just a group of people who hang out and collab with one another, share ideas, bounce thoughts off of one another. So until next time, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign out with one more. Oh, I thought I had another. Yeah, one more shout out, just real quickly. Okay, yeah, that's the same people. I thought someone else had just subscribed. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And remember, this channel exists to simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space. We can dream alone. We can create alone. But together, we can achieve so much more. I'm going to go ahead and leave it up just for a little bit here so you guys can still talk back and forth with one another in the chat, and then I'll close her down.